Good evening, everyone. My name is Will Lawrence. I live in Maitland, Nova Scotia, and I specialize in HO scale modeling the Devco Railway and the Cape Breton and Central Nova Scotia Railway, as well as CN in Eastern Canada during the same period. Tonight, I want to talk to you about weathering using a material that apparently not everyone uses. I use oil pastels for weathering. I'm going to talk to you about what they are, how I use them, and what benefits they have. So we're going to switch over to the bench cam. This gives you a much prettier view than my face. So when I work with weathering a car, I use basically every weathering material, but tonight I'm going to talk specifically about one. Now I'm going to show you what they look like. These are called oil pastels. These are available at just about any art store. I don't even remember where I bought these ones, but as you can see the name, they are made by a company called Pentel. Oil pastels are very compressed sticks of oil paint pigment in a very small amount of thinner, much more rigid than heavy body oils in tubes, but it is the same pigment and the same suspension. These are used the same way that pastel chalks are used, but they're much because they're oil. They have much more tendency to they have a smear effect on the work, and they are much more permanent. And I have found they are a good alternative to heavy body oils or to enamel washes for certain modeling techniques. And I'm going to show you a couple of the ways that I use it. So I'll stop the share there. So as I showed in the image, I work with, as you can see, this is a small container of the thinner in the picture, which is a odorless odorless turpentine substitute. Turpenoid is one brand. This one is Mona Lisa, available at Michael's. I also use some micro brushes, and I use some regular brushes. This is a 20-aught artist's brush, a petite monogram, and this is a single-aught petite filbert. That's what I'm going to use tonight. And for a test car, I'm just going to use this old Intermountain grain hopper. So the important thing to remember is they behave exactly like oils do, except they're more rigid. So the first thing you can do with these pastels is you pick a color that might be a rust color, and you can very simply just draw them along the edge of the car, like that, around the sharp edge. And that's going to leave a trace of material right along that edge. And I'm going to brush that off with a wider brush. This is a 1/4 inch oval mop that I use. I'm just going to brush off the excess pieces of pigment. And that's just going to leave a little mark. It's kind of difficult to see on the camera, but it's just going to leave a little mark of a oxide or rust color right at the corner of the material, just right where the paint is wearing off. Because the paint is always thinner on the corners of a rail car, because that's the way paint behaves. So again, I'm going to just carefully dust off the big crumbs that come off, and it's going to leave a little line of color right on that edge. I can do something similar along the top edge. Hopefully that'll show a little better. And I'm just very simply rubbing the stick across. It really is that simple. This works very much like the weathering pencils that we see, except the weathering pencils, they have their virtues, but if you, in certain circumstances, you might want a different effect, or you might want something that's going to stand up a little more to the steps that you're putting the model through. Just like I said, I use all the techniques, and the reason I use them all is each one is suited to a different situation. Second way I can use these pastels, I can take a micro brush and just take a little of the material on the micro brush. And as I said, this stuff smears. It's soft enough to smear onto the brush. As I work it on, I'm going to show you how I've got a little bit of material on that brush now. Now I'm going to do something similar with the brush again on the corner of the work, and I'm going to transfer just some of that material onto the model and just work it along. Another example is these vertical seams. I can work with the micro brush across the raised weld seams that are molded into this car. And it's very much like dry brushing. It's going to pick up a very small amount of material, very small amount of pigment, And as I work, what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to get some of that built up. I'm going to go across the seam now because that's going to trap some of the pastel against that weld line. Again, I'm going to get my oval mop out and just get a few crumbs loose. And I'm going to take a little bit of thinner. I'm just going to drop it against that seam. And what that's going to do is that's going to spread around that pigment just a little bit better. And it's going to act almost like a pin wash, which we will get to as well. Sometimes, if you want a little bit more on your brush, what you can do is take a fresh micro brush and again collect some of that odorless turpentine substitute. And I like the turpentine substitute instead of, say, mineral spirits or Versol because it is actually it reacts differently to the paint and the plastic that you're working with. Whereas mineral spirits will sometimes eat through the paint or lettering that you've got done on, especially if it's a factory model, or it may even attack the plastic. So sometimes I use the turpenoid or mineral or even just turpentine itself. So in this case, I've rubbed a little thinner on this and then picked up some pigment. As you can see, that gives me a very different result. It's very difficult to see sometimes. It does give me a very different result. I'm going to take a fresh brush with just some thinner on it. I'm just going to mop up a little of the excess that's formed along that seam. And the idea is a little goes a long way. With weathering, you want to build up small quantities. So those are two of the easiest ways, and it only takes a couple minutes to show you, but I'm going to do more. So again, now this time I'm going to use actually I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to use my spotter. I'm going to take my spotter, take a little thinner on it. So I'm going to use black. I'm going to use different colors here so you can see a little bit of the effects that I'm building up. And this time I'm building up a little extra on the brush. You see those little indentation in the pastel. You can see I've used that one quite a bit. So this one I'm going to use it kind of like I'd use a panel line accent. Again, I build it up, just mop it on with the brush, and I come back with the micro brush with the thinner on it, and I mop away the excess because I just want to highlight that seam is what I want to do. I want that seam to stand out just a little bit from the surrounding paint, just to show where those little bits of dirt cling to that irregularity in the surface, just like that. I'm going to show a difference again in how this works. I'm going to do the next seam. I'm going to use the dry technique again. So I'm picking up some dry pigment on my micro brush, but this time there's no thinner involved yet. I'm just going to gently work it across the car. And again, this is all doing exactly the same thing, but you can see there's slight variations in how it looks because of the way it's applied. So again, brushes had the biscuits. We'll get a fresh one. Micro brushes. I love micro brushes. I buy them on Amazon. $10 gets you 400. Used to buy 5 of them for $1.50 at the hobby shop. $10 for 500. You'll say, well, they don't last as long. Well, no, they don't. But as you can see, I treat them as expendable. I use them for cleaning my airbrush. I use them for applying materials that are going to harm my good brushes. Anywhere I might not want to use one of my nice art store brushes. Because even a cheap Michaels brush is more money than one of these. Much less my nice Desser brushes. You can see I'm just mopping up after that again. So this line was done just by applying the pastel material directly, just picking it up off the pastel with the micro brush and rubbing it onto that seam. And now I've cleaned it up a little bit. I've got a slightly better one. So again, I'm going to use this. This one's got thinner on it. So I'm going to get a little thinner and I'm blotting the excess thinner off. And the reason I'm doing that is just I don't want it too soupy and I don't want it to run around on me. So I'm just basically by adding the thinner, you're changing how the material works and how it changes, like it flows. As you can see here, get a little more on there. So I've got a little bit of now I've got a little bit of the thinner and it's spreading out quite a bit. And that's going to bring us to our next stage in this technique. So that's going on. That now I'm going to use a dry brush for my mopping because there's already lots of thinner here. I don't need to add any more. And again, I use vertical strokes. Generally with weathering, I will follow the seam or I will follow the way gravity or wind goes. Although in some cases, like I said, the first seam I did, I will go crossways and I'm having difficulty getting it to pick up much material because a perpendicular stroke will pick up a lot more material. So again, I'm just cleaning it off. So I've got a little bit of variation in how these seams look. In case you haven't already figured out, this car is destined for the grit booth, so I don't really care. So now, go back to using an actual brush. So this, when I use an actual brush for this technique, I can load up with quite a bit more thinner. I can build a little puddle, a pool in the stick that will let me build up. Now, this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a pin wash. So I'm going to get in line with got lots of thinner in my brush, and I just drop a little in there and let capillary action pull it along corner right here in this corner between the sill and the side of the car. So sometimes it works better than others. There it goes a little bit. You can see it pulling along, very much like an enamel wash or like the Tamiya panel line accent range of colors, which are also very good. Just this, because I think because it's of a different material and a different thinner, you can use this in different ways in conjunction with other materials. The rule of thumb when you're weathering, especially for washes, is your washes should be a different thinner than your paint, because then the thinner involved in the wash will not attack the paint underneath. Thinners for enamels and oils, generally speaking, will not attack cured acrylic paint. Similarly, acrylic thinners, water, for example, will not attack cured enamel paint or lacquers. So very often I will even put a clear coat on as a buffer between my color coat and my weathering coats. And that's why, because I want to protect it from reacting. There's nothing worse than doing your weathering and trying to, control your weathering with some thinner, and the thinner attacks the paint or the decals instead of your actual weathering. So I don't know if it shows very clearly. What I've got there now is I've got a little line here along this frame rail, and as it dries, it will fade out a little bit. That gives you a little bit of latitude, much like powdered chalks do when you clear coat them. They tend to fade out a little bit. So you usually cannot easily overdo it accidentally. It's very difficult to accidentally overdo it because it usually backs off with every coat just a little bit. And sometimes you have to work yourself up to certain weathering techniques that may or may not be reversible. That's one reason chalks are so popular, because you can just wash them off. Ditto powders if you haven't clear coated them yet. So I'm just going to do this whole seam, this whole groove. So what I'm doing is I'm just simulating the accumulation of grime in this little, corner between the side sill and the car body. The stuff is going to, collect there. Rain is going to pull things there. A founding principle, I don't remember who said it, when you're talking about weathering, is remember, gravity lurks everywhere. Generally speaking, dirt and grime are going to move with gravity, not with wind, because the wind is only working on the car when the car is in motion and it's moving in different directions and it might be different speeds. But gravity is the same most of the time, all the time it's sitting still, which is most of the life of a railcar. So you can have some streaking and whatnot that follows the wind, but generally speaking, streaks should be vertical. I've got a little bit of spotting on this car now, so I need to clean that up a little bit. Just a few little boo-boos with the brush, and they're not a problem to clean up. Like Bob Ross said, there's no mistakes, there's only happy accidents. And he's very right. There's no right and wrong with this stuff. I mean, sure, the prototype photograph is going to guide you, and it should, but don't worry so much about it. Because even if you've seen that prototype photograph, if you haven't shown it to your buddies, they haven't seen it. Don't worry about it. And it's okay to combine weathering techniques from two different prototype photographs too. People think that guys like me are obsessed with precision, and sometimes we are, but we also just want to get the car done too. So another thing we can do with this, if we want to steal a page from the military modelers, is we do the opposite. What I've been doing here so far is basically simulating the deterioration of the paint right where the raised part is, or simulating shadow and dirt accumulating in the corners. There's another thing we can do. This is something military modelers do more than we do. But highlighting can call out the raised parts because that's how it would, how light will form shadows in the smallest possible crease, and it will also reflect differently off the smallest possible highlight point. So I'm going to pick up some white on my brush, on my micro brush. I'm going to work it just along this top of this seam, just a little bit, because that's where, again, the paint is worn off. It might not be black or rust colored in there. Sometimes it's a lighter color, especially the primer. So I'm just going to do a little light there. And what that's going to do, I'm going to do another one like that. And that's going to just highlight that there's a raised part there. And your eye's going to recognize that. This is something tank modelers do all the time. Look carefully at our shows. We often have the guys from Nova Scotia Modelers Guild, and the armor guys. They know, and the figure guys. They do a lot of this because they generally model things that are, in a static lighting situation. So some of their stuff we can't use because we have real lighting to work with. It's always moving. But little stuff like this, little highlights, just a little bit of simulation of how the light from this side is going to catch the high points on the car. And like I said, also simulate some of the paint, the early stage paint wear. Just going to do this up with a little bit of white. That, like I said, that's going to highlight it as there, even if it's clean. And this is where the micro brush technique really works nicely. Like when I go across the tops panel here, the COTS panel rather. So from the UK for a second. It's going to show a little bit across that. So it's going to show that it's not all one homogeneous coat of paint. There's different layers here and different things are weathering to different degrees. That's another thing is that on a rail car, like I modeled the mid to late 1990s. So this gray CN 3800 cubic foot hopper, it's going to have been around a while. If it's still in this paint with the red noodle, it's been around a while. So what I want to do is I want to simulate that a little bit. Some of the wear through on the paint, but not so much on the COTS panel because that's going to have been renewed when the car got shopped. So for that, I'm just going to actually take a fresh brush, just take a little bit off there. Right where the COTS is, that should not have a highlight and it shouldn't be much dirt on it because these panels got renewed whenever the car went through a shop. What I've got here now is just a few of those. And now we're going to add a little rust to one of them because you can do more than one color. So I'm just going to take my micro brush and I'm going to do just little strokes, little light strokes. I just want to pick up a little bit of that raised red, but still show some of the white. There we go. We'll add some more of the darker oxide here on the same one. And again, light strokes. Don't worry too much if you stray a bit because you can always clean it up. But you can also do this. So now you can also do straight, a little more streaks up here. Instead of sweeping it away, I'm going to work it down a little bit, just a little bit, see a little light streak there. Again, less is more. I'm going to add a bigger streak in the middle of the car body. Hopefully that'll show up better. So I'm going to work this a bit just to make sure I've got lots of pigment and not much thinner on my micro brush. I'm just going to put a little dollop there, just like that. There we go. Just a little dollop. And again, my trusty mop, oval mop, just click, 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 click. It pulls it down. That's all it takes. Let's get the petite monogram involved here. I'm just going to put a drop. I'm going to work up a bit of it thinner on it. I'm going to put a drop there, drop there, drop there, a drop there. I'm going to set it down for a minute. I'm going to let the stuff evaporate a little because I don't want all that thinner in play for the next step. I'm just going to let it evaporate just a little bit. That should be enough. And again, I'm going to take my mop. I'm going to go flick, 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 make it flick, flick. And just what this is doing is I'm trying to simulate places where a little bit of the paint is worn through, some dirt has gotten on and been pulled down by the rain. And again, I get this nice vertical streak. And the more you pull it down, the thinner it gets and the fainter it gets. So you can just keep working it down until it's almost nothing at all. and build up a lot of those, or you can just correct something if you feel you've done it wrong. There really is no right and wrong way to this. Same will work with dry pig with pigment right off the stick. So I'm just going to pick up a little here on my micro brush and boop, 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 boop. That's a technical term. Boop, boop, boop. Let me get a little more. I want a nice big spot right there. This is going to be more in a more obvious rust spot. Again, with my oval mop, flick, 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 flick. And this is going to pull it down a little bit. It's almost none there. So this is something that's usually done with heavy body oils, but you can do it with this too. Just put it, this time I picked some up on the brush, but then I put some thinner on the brush because it'll work that way too. And each one gives a slightly different variation of the effect. So like I said, which is the right technique for weathering? All of them in combination. That's how I roll. I didn't remember where I stole this technique. I stole it from somebody. Somebody suggested it and I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Because really what you get here is the usability of the chalks, but you get the permanence and the medium of the oils. So it's a nice compromise. And again, I'm going to do a little more of a seam. I'm going to get some thinner on my brush and get some of this nice dark oxide. This is the brown, I think. I don't know what these colors are called. The other colors, the greens, the blues, the oranges, I use those sometimes for other things. I've done some rail box cars that I had in Railroad Model Craftsman a couple of years ago. And when I did the rail box logos, I actually used these pastels, the yellow and the blue and the red to build, and the black to build up the lettering in the ghost lettering effect that I was doing on that car. Because I was using ghost lettering decals produced by Precision Design Corp. And they are just outline decals, and you have to fill in the color yourself. And they work beautifully. And I found the oils gave me a nice way to build up the effect, to work slowly. So here you can see I'm using a lot of thinner. And because there's a lot of thinner, it's pulling along this corner at the top. I'm just filling that in because that's a place where material is going to pool, be trapped, get the car sitting still, and it's going to, over time, it's going to work its way through the paint, and eventually the steel underneath is going to start to rust. Rust never sleeps. Ask Neil Young, he'll tell you. And again, you got to, it's good to have techniques that work slowly because while it's a little frustrating to have to get through all this tedium, it lets you build up the effect gradually. And it's very important with, especially with oils, because oils, one of the virtues of them is their long working time. And it's good because once they're set, they're pretty much forever. You're pretty much not taking them off easily. But that's okay because you can just work with it slowly and build up the effect that you want. You see, all I'm doing here is I'm just working with some thinner on a micro brush and just working along just below that seam. I've wiped out some of my other weld seams, but that's okay. I can fix that later. And once that's dried, I can layer on some black. That'll give a different effect. I especially like laying in some oxide red here and then some black on top. That works very well because it simulates what happens in the real world where the dirt lays on top of the rust most of the time. Now this one, and here's where it's nice. Here's where the pastels come in. The pastels, and they're thinner, dry much more quickly than heavy body oils do. And once they're pretty much dry to the touch, you can then lay on just like, again, just like Bob Ross, wet on wet, he called this technique. He actually stole it from, somebody claimed that he stole that technique. Well, he did. He stole it from an artist named Raphael during the Renaissance. But anyway, but I digress. It's what I do. I'm known for it. So we're just going to lay a little black on top of that, and we're going to have the tinge of rust underneath and the black of the grime going on top. If I had more of a brown, I might do that, but the brown I have is kind of close to the oxide color, so I don't think I will. You can get these in all kinds of colors, so not just the standard reds and blacks, but you can get all kinds of different ones. I think I paid $5 for this set of pastels, something like 15 years ago. So that's also a virtue of them. They're cheap. And that is something else for which I am known. Um, so generally, I just clean them up with the regular thinner. But for final cleaning, I usually take my good brushes. I switch them around and some paint remover. This is Poly S Easy Lift Off. I don't think it's manufactured anymore. And if anybody has it, I am not for sale. I'm not going to tell you because instead I'm going to buy it for my own personal stash because I love this stuff. So you're on your own. Sorry. And again, take my mop. This is one of my go-to weathering brushes for basically every technique. Is a couple of nice round mop brushes. I think I've got two of them. Yeah, two 1/4 inch or 6.3 millimeter oval mops. Those are great for doing what I was doing there, dispersing material, spreading it around, and just building up a smaller layer. Those are the basics right there of working with oil pastels. It really is a simple technique. It's a step or two up removed from the very basic powders or the pastel chalks, but it gives you some more flexibility. It allows you to do some techniques you can't really do with chalks, but it's almost as easy to clean up when you're first starting with it, and it works very well with different undercoats. So at this point, we'll probably go back to our live call and I'll take some questions.